Hello and welcome to One on One. I am Cyril Stober. My guest today holds a first degree in political science from Columbia University, New York in the United States, and master's degrees in law from Cambridge University in the United Kingdom, as well as the University of London. Now, his work experience spans the Nigerian Law Reform Commission, where he was a research officer, to the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, where he held various positions from 1985 to 2014, capping up as Deputy Director General, Development Sector, responsible for the Regional Bureau for Africa, Arab countries, Asia and the Pacific, Latin America and the Caribbean, the WIPO Academy and Special Projects Division. Now, just to mention that along the line, he was responsible at various times for WIPO external offices in Brussels, New York, Rio de Janeiro, Singapore, Tokyo and Washington, D.C. By the way, he's multilingual. Apart from his native Igbo and English, he speaks French and German. Today, he is Nigeria's top diplomat as Minister of Foreign Affairs. Let's welcome Mr. Geoffrey Onyeama. Minister, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure.
Well, in the next 1 hour or so, we hope to find out what Nigeria's foreign policy is. Now, we used to know from a long time ago that Africa was said to be the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy. Has that changed? And people say, well, over time, with the dynamics of foreign relations, we probably should be looking just beyond the mere Africa being the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy.
Well, I wouldn't say it's changed. You know, I mean, ultimately, this is your neighborhood, and you have these concentric circles. And obviously the first circle is Africa. So this is the reality of where the country finds itself. So Africa does remain the centerpiece of our foreign policy. And, but also because of the vision that we have for the country. We want to see greater integration in the West African region. So in the framework of ECOWAS, this is what we're pushing for. And also, you know, in the framework of the African Union, greater African integration. And these are, you know, philosophies and objectives that we have really bought into. So the answer is yes, Africa still remains very much the centerpiece of our foreign policy.
Now, what about what they say about you've got to think home first and say Nigeria first? Now, it's a slogan that's going around the world these days. With recent developments in America, you would hear America first. Why not Nigeria first?
Well, it's taken for granted. You know, I would say actually that the Americans are stating the obvious, because any government that is elected has as its primary responsibility the well-being of its citizenry. I mean, that's why you're elected in the first place. So that is obviously always going to be your primary objective. So with Nigeria, it's absolutely no different. It is very much Nigeria first.
Now, while we would say that Nigeria has always been what's termed the big brother of its neighbors, Nigerians wonder if its neighbors and the other countries in Africa have always regarded Nigeria with the same kind of reverence.
Reverence is an interesting word. I don't know whether it's the appropriate way to regard Nigeria. But what I would say is that the neighboring countries do regard Nigeria with a great deal of respect, and I would say also affection. I think this is shown very clearly whenever there is an issue in any country in our neighborhood. They beat a fast track to Abuja to call Mr. President, and you know, whatever tricky situation they find themselves in, whatever assistance they need, they always come to Nigeria. And also, if they want to develop, you know, a policy, global, you know, a regional policy, they always come to Nigeria first.
Would that be because they are aware of the huge resources that Nigeria possesses and the fact that it would always, most times, be made available to them?
Well, I mean, they are aware of the resources that we possess, and I use the word resources in a broader sense. Human resources, material resources, and I think also just the history and the tradition of Nigeria. They do realize that very much, and I think they do realize that Nigeria has the wherewithal to help these countries, you know, achieve what they want to achieve.
Where then would you say this general feeling comes from, that Nigerians are not liked across the borders when Nigerians are in other countries, particularly their immediate neighbors, and they're doing well? There is this, there's this feeling against Nigerians. Where does it come from? Because you do hear this as popular opinion that in other countries, Nigerians are regarded with some form of, you know, they're not really liked. Where does it come from?
I think some of it could just be envy, you know. Nigerians are, you know, very dynamic people, often very successful. We have an unfortunate habit of flaunting our success, and so that's obviously something that will grate, that would not be, you know, so welcome. We Nigerians obviously, you know, go to other countries and exude a lot of self-confidence, and so, you know, you can see that, you know, sometimes it is something that would not be as appreciated, and, you know, so there might be sometimes that sense, you know, of lauding it over others. But I think, but I would also disagree with that narrative. You know, as you said when you introduced me, I had worked in an international organization, and for many years I was responsible for Africa. So I visited all the African countries, and I had been involved in technical assistance, you know, provision for almost all the African countries. And that's not the sense I ever got, you know, that Nigerians were not, you know, appreciated. And I think it's probably just more the slight envy or resentment that smaller countries will always have towards bigger countries. You know, the US in the Americas, you know, there's a way, if you go to Latin America and the way that the US is seen, you know, you can see that. The way Germany has been seen for many years, and continental Europe, you know, you'll see that, and I think China today and India. So it's normal that when you're a big country, you know, nationals of smaller countries, you know, would tend to have that sense of, you know, envy and maybe a slight resentment sometimes.
Well, Nigeria's position both at sub-regional and regional level, has it been really beneficial? Some citizens would say the country has not matched its forays in diplomacy with business and other areas. For instance, the huge resources and assistance that Nigeria has availed its neighbors has not really translated into Nigerians making both economic and business gains in those countries.
Again, I'm not sure that I would totally agree with that. You know, for instance, as you know, we were in the Gambia, and we visited the Gambia a number of times during the crisis recently. And we came to see that there was a very strong Nigerian business community in the Gambia that one would not have been aware of. The same thing with Senegal, with Sierra Leone, and of course we know with Ghana, Cotonou across the border, and a lot of the Nigerian banks that are being set up in these countries. So I would actually say that that there's quite a strong Nigerian business community and presence in those countries.
Let's go back to some examples. The Liberian issue, for instance, and people say we'd expected that given the role Nigeria had played in Liberia and Sierra Leone, of course, that it would have been a lot better if we had matched this with a movement of, for instance, or if we had involved the business community, say in the reconstruction of Liberia, to say it like, in terms of reconstruction of infrastructure, Nigerian companies take the lead. People have been looking at such things and say it doesn't really exist. Yes, there's a large business community, but mostly in the informal sector.
Yeah, well, I mean, the question you have to ask with that kind of investment is whether we have, the big companies that can go out there and compete even at the regional level. I remember, for instance, during the regime of President Obasanjo, one of the points that the Nigerian business community was making to the president at the time was that, look, we're not able to compete with international companies because we're all too small. And what we need are bigger conglomerates, Nigerian conglomerates, to be able to take these people on, to be able to project Nigeria's might in a lot of these countries. And I think that was actually what informed the creation of Transcorp at the time, for instance, to try to build big Nigerian companies. So the reason, to answer your question, maybe why we don't see this kind of engagement by Nigeria and some of these countries is we just don't have these huge, conglomerates that can sustain that kind of effort and project that kind of economic power.
Well, Minister, one of the biggest issues in recent times has been that of Nigerians in other countries coming under attacks. And we recall what happened in South Africa. This led so many Nigerians to call for all kinds of things. Well, what is the situation like?
Specifically with South Africa?
With South Africa specifically.
Yeah, you recall that I went to South Africa and I asked the Minister of Interior to come with me, and he very kindly accompanied me. So what we did, what I felt was important when we got there, was we wanted a clear deliverable, because this was something that was recurring. It was not the first, it was not the second, it was not the third. So we spoke to the Nigerian community before we met with the government of South Africa. And what I could see immediately that was a missing link was a direct engagement between the Nigerian community in South Africa and the higher echelons of the South African government. And I felt this was important because there was a trust deficit between the police, South African police, and the Nigerian community. The Nigerian community were convinced that the police were sometimes complicit in these xenophobic attacks. So, so I felt it was important to, create a forum where the two could engage and institutionalize that engagement. So we proposed, and the South African government accepted, an early warning unit. And so the idea was that the Nigerian Union of South Africa would have a seat in that forum, and as well as the South African Police and the Home Affairs and Foreign Affairs of South Africa. And on the other side, the Nigerian High Commission and the Consulate. So this mechanism was created and to meet at least once every quarter, if not earlier. And within this forum, the idea was also to share intelligence, share information, build confidence, and be able to preempt, pending issues and attacks and so forth. So, so that I thought was a very important deliverable that we believe that would go a long way to addressing a lot of the issues. And of course, as you know, also the issue of compensation kept coming up. And we also felt that this would be a forum in which the Nigerians in South Africa would have access to the higher echelons of the South African government to press for these kinds of demands. So we've set that up. And I asked the acting High Commissioner to quickly have the first meeting of that committee, because what it does is that you're on the same side. The Nigerians in South Africa and the authorities and the police now are on the same side and have bought in and have a stake in preventing.
You're confident that this would serve as, you know, the preventive measures that we've all been looking for?
I'm confident it will do so, because, as I said, it is important that the law enforcement agencies of South Africa see things from the perspective of, you know, the victims, the Nigerians. So I think it's a very good first step, and we hope, you know, it will work.
Now, not long after that, we had issues with India as well.
Well, the Indian one is different, because this was really an isolated case. You know, unlike the South African one, it's not something that has been recurring, and it could be attributed to a particular incident, one incident. But what was I wouldn't say satisfying, but what gave us hope with regards to the India one was that the government came out immediately, condemned it, took very strong measures, arrested 5, you know, of the perpetrators, and, you know, really showing that it's not something that they would tolerate, and have given us all the assurances that all the measures will be put in place to ensure that there will not be a repetition. So, you know, so that was much more reassuring.
Now, with advancements in technology, it does make the job of administration, well, if they say it eases so many things, it also creates challenges as well. Quite recently, the social media, it's one of the challenges, was awash with footage claimed to have been shot in Libya, showing people in a queue. Some people claim those were Nigerians who have been led to be either killed or thrown out of Libya. You see things like that in the social media. What is the response to that? Now, how can citizens begin to know what is real, what is imagined, or what is cooked up?
Well, this is a very good point. I mean, this is the challenge we have with the social media. We know that a lot of what you see, you cannot believe. I mean, for instance, I saw one of a young girl that was ostensibly in Libya, you know, that was being brutalized. And but you could see clearly that these were not Libyans, you know, these were Asiatics. So clearly it was not in Libya. There was nothing to show that it was a Nigerian to start with, or where it was taking place. So you cannot develop policy on the basis of, you know, what you see on social media. What we do is we have mechanisms in place. We have embassies in at least 114 countries around the world. So we have representation and presence in 114 countries. And the job of those embassies is to look after the interest of Nigerians, amongst other things, in those countries. So, so we have to rely on the information we're getting from our embassies and our missions. And we also, you know, rely on them to do what needs to be done to ensure that the interests of every Nigerian, the safety of every Nigerian, is, you know, is part of their routine work in terms of protecting it.
Now, with the embassies and the missions, is it easy to document the number of Nigerians in many of these countries, particularly African countries? Because it's known that people just cross the borders and they stay in there, and not very many have any form of representation or presence in the missions and the embassies. How tough is it to know the number of Nigerians in foreign countries?
It's tough because a lot of them are irregular migrants. So by its very nature, they don't want to be documented, and they don't want to appear on the radar. So, people who destroy whatever documentation they have, very often they might claim that they come from different countries. I know when I was in Geneva, in Switzerland, a Nigerian I knew very well, and he was claiming that in the courts that he was a Liberian, and that he was fleeing from the Liberian conflict, and that his family and his life was in danger in Liberia. So we know these things go on, and so it is difficult to document the irregular migrants, and these are particularly what pose challenges. And they also pose challenges with respect to the repatriation or deportation of irregular migrants. As you know, in a lot of European countries now, they are trying to repatriate and Nigerians, quote unquote, Nigerians. So it has to be done in cooperation with the Nigerian government, and there's certain international rules and regulations regarding that. And one of the things we as a government insist on, that before a country can deport or repatriate a Nigerian and an irregular migrant, number one, you have to prove that the person is indeed a Nigerian. And then there are other things like all the legal rights have to be exhausted. But so, it's a challenge sometimes proving who is a Nigerian and who is not amongst the irregular migrants. Of course, amongst the regular migrants, it's not such a problem.
Well, in terms of Nigerians moving to other countries and what's been seen now as irregular migration, there are some countries that have taken a tough stance against such. Where do we fall in? Sometimes foreign relations might not be clear to citizens. There are Nigerians who propose what they call tit-for-tat diplomacy. If you have a situation where Nigerians are regarded as irregular migrants and are being deported or removed from countries, some Nigerians feel the Nigerian state should be doing the same and taking out nationals of those countries. How do you respond to that?
I wouldn't condone that as a means of carrying out your foreign relations. If, as I said, you have regular migrants and you have irregular migrants, and Nigeria as a government, we cannot condone Nigerians going to countries in an irregular way. We always encourage Nigerians to respect the laws of countries that they go to, abide by those laws. So, so we would never seek to have a policy of reciprocity, against a country that has merely been, implementing its own laws. So the way we would treat nationals of other countries in Nigeria would be according to the laws of Nigeria, and it would be influenced by the laws of Nigeria, and it would not be influenced necessarily by how they treat Nigerians who are not within the framework of their laws, who are not law-abiding in their countries. So if you are deporting irregular Nigerians from your country, we would not deport regular, migrants in Nigeria. But if they were irregular, we would, of course.
Well, that's presupposing that you do know that you have a huge number of irregular migrants, because some tend to feel that there's a high number of irregular migrants in Nigeria, and not much has been done about that. And sometimes they're from neighboring countries, which we have just accepted as our role has been our brother's keepers. That kind of demonstration is not seen from those other countries. That's their argument.
That's the argument. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's not, again, totally correct. I mean, we have cases all the time at a lower level of nationals of neighboring countries being deported from Nigeria. And of course, you remember years ago when there was a mass deportation of Ghanaians from Nigeria, for instance. So we do have a history of that. And in fact, a few days ago, actually, we were discussing with one of the neighboring countries regarding recent deportations of Nigerians that we've considered to be refugees and should have been treated in the framework of the refugee laws. And they were also pointing out that a number of their nationals had also recently been
this ties up with the challenge of the refugee situation that we have all over the world, and Nigeria is not immune from that as well. Going by what's been happening in particularly the northeast of Nigeria, and you do have refugees, Nigerians moving to other countries. What is it like at this point in time?
Well, first of all, there's a special category of people that are refugees. Okay, so it's not every migrant or irregular migrant that is classified as a refugee. There are certain criteria, and then they have to be documented and accepted. There's the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, who will, they will be able to determine that these people qualify as refugees and therefore should be treated under the provisions, international provisions for refugees. But to answer your question, yes, we do have, because of the conflict, the security challenges in the northeast, refugees in neighboring countries, Nigerian refugees, in particular in Cameroon. So in Cameroon we have almost up to 60,000 Nigerian refugees. They are documented as refugees, accepted as refugees, and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees supervises accommodation, a camp for them. And we have just signed an agreement with the government of Cameroon, a tripartite agreement, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Nigeria, and Cameroon, regarding these refugees and their repatriation. Refugees ordinarily would like to go back to their countries once the environment is conducive. So we do have those problems.
Now, we have also seen numbers of Nigerians who are described as returnees. And sometimes we hear they're voluntary returnees from other countries who in recent times have been coming back. And they've had not too good tales about the kind of reception they had in those countries. What's the Foreign Affairs Ministry doing about that in the first place? And these returnees, is there a way to actually ascertain the conditions of their status?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the obvious case is Libya. We don't have a diplomatic presence in Libya at the moment, and the reality is that Libya is, to all intents and purposes, a failed state, at the moment. So we would ordinarily not encourage any Nigerian to go there, but Nigerians do because they see it as a transit point to getting into Europe.
Well, I'm not cutting you, but is there a form of travel advice about going to countries such as Libya? We do hear countries sometimes issuing travel advice to their citizens. We don't hear that happening frequently from this fact.
Yes, you have to look at the status of. You have a point in a sense, but when you're dealing with irregular migrants, they are not going through the conventional routes. There is no transport route to Libya at the moment from Nigeria. So anybody, who is going to Libya, I think it's pretty much known that, Libya is in a state of turmoil,
right.
And we have freedoms in this country.
Right.
Some countries have exit visas, well, at least for their government officials and others.
Okay.
But Nigerians are free to move around as they want.
You see, I raised this because some of the returnees have been known to say, well, if I had any form of advice, especially from my country, that this place I'm going to is not stable, I probably would not have gone in the first place. You hear some of the returnees saying that, you know.
Well, I haven't heard that. You know, what I've heard the returnees say, you know, is that there's been somebody who has told them that, you know, they can get a job in Europe and, you know, if they come on this route and they pay some money. And I think that now it's something that's, you know, human trafficking has been going on for a very long period of time. And the reality is that in the case of Libya, the vast majority of those people would actually qualify as people who have been, you know, trafficked. And there is a huge business, human trafficking. Our president met with the UK Prime Minister, Theresa May, in New York, and 3 other heads of state to start addressing this issue of human trafficking. And you will find that a large number of those across the Sahara, of especially young girls, but also young men, are really cases of illegality, you know, criminal enterprises, human trafficking, and so forth. So it's not really something that lends itself to, you know, travel advisory notices, because these are not conventional, you know, travelers. So the foreign ministry, we're addressing that together. After the meeting the president had with Theresa May, there's going to be an international conference, you know, on this whole issue of human trafficking. And of course, we know that too large a number of Nigerians are victims of human trafficking, and we're trying to develop policies. But it's very difficult because, you know, at the end of the day, it really is a question of education and a question of economic opportunities in our country. We're also trying to engage with the European Union in providing vocational training so that a lot of these potential victims of human trafficking can have skills to find, you know, jobs in Nigeria.
Now, we'll return to that in a moment, but now that you speak of the subject of what the missions and the embassies, Nigerian embassies, are meant to do, and the fact that in a place like Libya, we do not have that. What is the state of Nigerian missions in many countries? I mean, there have been disappointing reports about the conditions of Nigerian embassies and missions abroad, and how functional they are, and how Nigerians in the diaspora have had challenges, you know, accessing services at these missions.
Yeah, this is an unfortunate narrative, but you're quite right. It is a narrative that is there. And it's something that we're working, this government is working extremely hard to address. As you know, we're going through a process of induction of ambassadors. So we're going to be sending out, in fact, we're in the process of sending out, you know, about 80 envoys, you know, ambassadors around the world. And during the induction course, it's something that's been hammered to them, the importance of our embassies and our diplomats in those embassies understanding that they are service providers, and having that culture, that mentality, and that professional skill of providing those services. So we're working extremely hard. But I will say that, you know, no news is good news. So invariably, you will hear of extreme cases. But by and large, the vast majority of Nigerian embassies, the officials in those embassies are doing an excellent job. We know we're not the easiest people to manage, but are doing an excellent job. And then some of the stories that come out in social media that keep being regurgitated, like one about the Canadian High Commission, for instance. That thing is 4 years old. And the Canadian High Commission is really one of the best performing of all our missions around. And I've had to send, well, not I had to, but I have sent a letter of commendation to them. because of the excellent work they've been doing recently and the very, very positive feedback we've been getting from the users. But I take your point, you know, it's something we have to work at, and we are. And then you talked about other the conditions of those embassies too, and we need to resource them better, you know, better funding.
How much has the economic crunch affected these missions? Cutbacks in terms of numbers and facilities?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. It's affected them very greatly. In fact, a pending issue that we have with these missions is that because of the drastic fall in the value of the naira, you know, the allocations, you know, are computed in naira and then changed into foreign exchange. So with the sharp fall in the value of the naira, all our embassies around the world have been receiving half, literally half of their allocations, which could not sustain them. So we've had a serious crisis, you know, over the last 9 months in the embassies, not having the funds even to pay their staff. I had to go to the Senate, you know, to ask for a environment, you know, and to cover that difference. And it took a long time to work its way through our financial system to get to them. And it's just now that we're beginning to get them back up to where they should be. So for the last 9 months, it's been a real catastrophe in our foreign missions. So there's a lot we have to do to put in place mechanisms to ensure that our foreign missions are well funded, funded on time, and are really fit for purpose. And part of what we're doing in recognition of where we are at today economically is also to rationalize our missions. So we're going to close some, you know, and really cut our coat according to our cloth. And a lot of the missions we have turned into what we call smart missions. So, you know, instead of having a full-blown 10, 15, 20 man, woman mission, you know, have about 3 people who can essentially carry out those functions.
The closures won't lead to cutback in personnel, staff rationalization? Is that part of it as well?
Yes, yes, yes. The rationalization has to be, you know, because a lot of our missions are also actually over bloated, you know, and we have not maintained very good practices in the past. You know, what we've had in the past, unfortunately, you know, is you've had envoys, heads of missions and embassies. They'll go there, they will recruit relatives as local staff and so forth, and put on the payroll, because we have an ideal number of employees for missions around the world, you know, within a range, and all of them are way above that. So, so we have to introduce much greater rigor and greater oversight in a lot of the practices carried out by our envoys in these embassies and missions around the world.
Well, Minister, of recent there's been apprehension about policies in other countries, particularly the United States, with the coming into office of the Trump administration, and with its much widely reported travel ban in some countries. While Nigeria is not on that list officially, it's been alleged that all kinds of maneuvers have been used to prevent legitimately qualified Nigerians from entry. There are reports of some Nigerians being turned back, Nigerians who had valid visas. What do you have to say in response to these reports, and what is the true position of things regarding movement of Nigerians into the U.S. with its current policies?
I think I have heard of 4 cases, you know, of 4 people who have complained that they had difficulties at the borders. And when you consider the number of Nigerians who go to the U.S., it's really an insignificant amount, you know. Then the other thing I would like to say is that, you know, a valid visa does not give you a right of entry into any country. interestingly, the immigration officer that you meet has full discretion as to whether to let you into the country or not. This is a sad reality of immigration policies of all the countries, including Nigeria. We have cases of people we've turned back at the border of Nigeria who have, you know, good travel documents. And there are other countries, African as well, that have turned back, that I have had to intervene personally, where Nigerians with valid visas have been turned back at the border. So this is a reality, and it's not something that's peculiar to the United States. So, you know, with regards to the US, as I said, the numbers are relatively small, and what we've done is we've asked them to bring them to our attention. If they've been able to get into the US after, you know, maybe a difficult process, to report to our missions, and if not, to come back to us. And I have received a WhatsApp message from a Nigerian that said that they were not allowed into the US, and we're processing that in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we're talking about single-digit numbers.
Right, but it's not as if there is any official restriction on Nigerians traveling to the US.
No, on the contrary, the US government has come out to state categorically that there isn't.
Well, Minister, Nigeria is fighting on all fronts to move forward, and one of the big challenges of this administration is in repatriating funds that are stashed in other countries. Given Nigeria's relations with these countries, where it is believed most of the loot is stashed in, why is it extremely difficult to have these funds repatriated? People are saying, even where countries have agreed, they have put in all kinds of conditions. It's even reported that some of the countries are insisting that they would have to know what these funds would be deployed to. What's the situation like?
Well, the situation is, yes, you're right. It can be extremely difficult getting funds repatriated. And for that reason, Nigeria sponsored at the United Nations a resolution on the illicit flow of funds to try to compel countries to do a lot more in facilitating repatriation of funds. And this has been now passed at the UN. And that was kudos to Nigerian diplomacy. That's one thing. The other thing is that, you know, a lot of these countries have legal procedures. So the government themselves have no power, you know, to direct that, you know, these funds should be repatriated to the country. If they did, you know, they would have done so. I mean, we know for a fact that under President Obama, they really went the extra mile in helping us to identify and recover stolen loot, the Swiss government as well. But they are also subject to their own laws of their countries. And so, you know, you have to go through the legal process. You have to prove that it's stolen. You have to prove that, you know, it belongs rightly to the government. And there's so many legal hurdles. And so when you have situations where there are people contesting that, as we've had in many cases, the Nigerians will come up and say, no, 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 I'm entitled to that money. It was not stolen. Then unfortunately, you have to just go through that process. But as I said, the UN resolution and others, Mr. President has done a fantastic job in putting it at the top of the international agenda. You know, so these countries are now very much on board in terms of trying to help developing countries, you know, recover their stolen loot. And it's a work in progress, but it's true. The Swiss, for instance, have in their laws, and they showed me the provisions, that when for them to be allowed to restitute funds, they have to be shown, they have to be sure of what it's going to be applied for. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. We're sovereign countries.
Well, these are the issues that many Nigerians cannot understand, because the popular opinion on the streets would be, It's our money.
We can do what we want with it. But this is only with regards to Switzerland. There's no other country that I know that has a similar provision. And I took this up with the Swiss foreign minister. I said, well, listen, we're a sovereign country, you know, and this is our money. And you accept that this is our money. And they said, well, we're really sorry. These are the provisions. It applies not just to Nigeria, but to any other country. And if we don't agree, and we had to, it took us some time to agree on the projects that those monies would be applied to, it will not be possible for us to restitute. So it's not an easy job. The Attorney General is doing a great job, and as I said, Mr. President has laid the framework, and a lot of the leaders of the Western world are really on board, and you know, slowly but surely we're getting there.
There have also been pledges from some major countries about lending a hand to Nigeria in its fight against insurgency. But again, it's seen most of the time as what's been propagated in the media, and how much of that support actually comes through, given our relations with these countries.
A lot. Well, it depends how you, I mean, we can start from our immediate neighbors. We have a multinational joint task force, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, you know, Benin, and we're all cooperating. And we really cannot thank enough the governments of those countries, Cameroon, Chad, and Niger, because they really helped us to reverse the tide of battle against Boko Haram, and they made enormous sacrifices. That's one. Then farther afield, the other countries have really come on board. There was a time when there was a trust deficit, where a number of potential allies in the Western world were not happy with the way we were prosecuting the war, and you know, pretty much had an embargo in place on, you know, giving us arms. They felt that, you know, no sooner did they provide these, they would fall into Boko Haram hands and so forth. But I think that President Buhari has been able to show single-mindedness and commitment to addressing these security challenges, and they have confidence in him, and for that reason they have been providing us with weaponry.
Some citizens say if the West is not forthcoming, what about the East?
Yes, I mean, we are cooperating with all countries, you know, and we're getting support from not just the East, around countries in the Gulf areas as well, and also Western countries. A lot of them are forthcoming. We know that the U.S. Congress is not as you know, supportive with regards to certain kinds of weaponry. Like there's a night vision equipment for planes. The Super Tucana, for instance, has been blocked in the U.S. Congress because there are, I think, about 3 or 4, you know, senators that have issues with some of the stories they're hearing about human rights violations in the Northeast, and for that reason they're blocking the sale of Super Tucana planes to Nigeria. But we're engaging with the U.S. and we've heard some very positive words from President Trump and the Secretary of State on that issue.
It's just a little bit about our trade relations with some of these countries. It would seem there is a shift to China, for instance. But again, people raise issues and say, with what Nigeria has been through, shouldn't we be a little bit circumspect in the dealings with China?
Yeah, you know, and I think Mr. President, well, I know Mr. President as well. Nigeria first. We have to be self-reliant. We cannot, as a policy, you know, situate our economic destiny in the hands of anybody, be they the West, be they the East. You know, we have to do what we can do for ourselves, and then we engage with countries on our terms and to suit our interests.
Yes, so there are terms, but if you're operating like we are most of the time from a disadvantaged position,
true,
how much clout can you pull with those countries?
You're absolutely right. I mean, our bargaining power is not that as strong as it could be, but it is also, you know, because 180 million people with huge natural resources, Nigeria is a very attractive bride, you know, to many, to most countries of the world, and we have you know, we are indeed, we're a big market for many countries. So we do have leverage. We do have, you know, a bargaining power. But you're right. You're absolutely right. I think the basic premise of your question is right, that every country, as I said to you at the outset, you know, is them first. It's China first. It's the US first. Trump is not saying anything new. It's Germany first. It's Britain first, you know. And it should be also Nigeria first, and it is Nigeria first. So there's no country out there that is going to have as its prime objective making Nigeria a great country. You know, it's not going to happen, and it's not going to be. So we have to do what we have to do in engaging these countries to ensure that it inures to the benefit of our country.
Back to the regional body, you have set up put a mechanism in place to ensure that when Nigeria goes out for positions, regional positions, for instance, it gets all the support that's arising from what happened the last time we sought a position here. How far with that? And well, it ties into what we've always said, that we're the big brother, but when it comes to seeking positions, the other countries are not in a hurry to grant Nigeria that support.
Well, I don't know. You know, we don't do too badly in terms of position. You know, we have the ADB. You know, we have a Deputy Secretary General of the UN, and you know, and a number of other positions. But your point is right. You're right. I think that, you know, when we go for these positions, I think we have to now have a conscious approach for going for high-profile positions, you know, and it's a question of just preparedness. Okay. I've never bought into the narrative that there are countries that are sort of against Nigeria, because okay. I've run for positions at the international level, and I know how these things work, and it's just a question of, you know, working hard at it.
Minister, it's been interesting talking to you. All too soon 1 hour has gone through. We hope we'll ask you to come again. There are so many issues that we'd like to talk about regarding Nigeria's foreign policy, but we thank you for availing us this opportunity.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure, and you've been extremely engaging. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I've been speaking with Foreign Affairs Minister Geoffrey Onyeama, and that's our program today. Next week, we'll reach you again on NTA One On One. I am Cyril Stober. Bye for now.